Outcast Engineer, the new career for Bardin that turns him into an absolute ranged powerhouse. In this video, I'm going to show you how I run Outcast Engineer Bardin, as it tends to work pretty well for me, at least through legend runs. How I rock him though tends to net me between 10 to 15k damage per run, without really chasing kills. The class is just pretty damn strong. We'll talk about loadout, talents, and the playstyle overall. So, let us begin. Now, to start with, this clip really exemplifies my Bardin playstyle for Engineer. Most of the time, I'm running with the crank gun out. The only time I really put it away is when it's reloading, when I'm refilling my special bar. I'll then switch to my main weapons while the bar is reloading, and my secondary weapon is purely for killing specials and elites. And of course, the crank gun provides fantastic crowd control, making this a pretty well-rounded playstyle and loadout. We can deal with crowds, we can deal with specials. We're perhaps a little bit lacking in the armor piercing, so we might need some help with that, but overall we can get a lot done. Let's look at the loadout. So my weapon of choice is usually the good old dual hammers. Fast attacks, wide sweeps, a good bit of crowd control, nice for potentially setting up some crowds to be gunned down by the old crank gun. And of course, we got a charged attack if we need some armor piercing, although it's not fantastic. But to be honest, I mostly just really enjoy dual weapons. But I think any kind of weapon can really work here, as long as it's more of a crowd control weapon than anything else. The old Engineer's hammer, of course, is the new weapon, which isn't too bad. It's quite good. I've quite enjoyed it. I do like the sound that it makes when you ding enemies around the face. And you've got the armor piercing axe attack over the top as well. So that could be an option if you do want some extra armor piercing damage, but still a good bit of crowd control. Sometimes I do like to rock the old shield and axe though. If I really want some extra armor piercing, I'll usually bring this along. And because it has lots of stamina, I can use lots of pushes, which means I can make up for the lack of crowd control from the axe itself. So my weapon is usually dual hammers, but I think this is kind of open to mix around with whatever weapon you prefer. For my secondary weapon, my ranged weapon, I like to bring the handgun for the elites and those damn dirty specials. It's powerful, it's accurate, and it'll take most of them out in one shot. And I think I prefer the handgun over most other ranged weapons for those reasons, and because I think I rely quite a lot on flick shots. I like to quickly turn to my specials, pull the weapon out, blast it, and put it away again. Although reloading it first, of course. We also have the new revolver for Bardin, the new ranged weapon. I'm not a huge fan of it, mostly because I don't like the delay on the normal shot. Because I do a lot of flick shots, I need to know exactly when the weapon is going to go off. And with this, I have to wait a second before it'll go off, which means I have to flick shot to the enemy and then track them for a second, which can be unpredictable, and then hope I don't miss. I'm sure with some practice I could get used to the delay and be effective with it, but honestly, the handgun does the same job. The revolver is a little bit stronger and has the ult mode, which can be useful, but like I say, I prefer the instant response of the handgun. Plenty effective for removing specials faces. And of course, the old crank gun, minigun, Gatling gun, whatever you want to call it, is really the true main weapon. So as I say, this is what I run around with most of the time, only swapping out to take out specials quickly with the handgun, or while I'm building pressure back up and reloading it, will I bring out my hammers. Now, as for my traits and things on my equipment, I've got a bit of attack speed and block cost reduction on my hammers. As I do use push a lot, having that stamina reduction is helpful, and of course attack speed is also good. Off balance for the perk, useful against heavy armor for me. I can add a bit of damage on if I block an enemy attack. For the handgun, power versus armored and crit chance, both useful for taking out those specials and elites. Also replenish ammo with headshots. Helps me to never run dry on the handgun. Stamina and block cost reduction. Again, I like to push stuff, so having that extra stamina really helps me out and helps keep me safe more than anything. And bark skin just to help with a bit of damage reduction. For my charm, power versus armored and crit power. Again, I'm just trying to negate my lack of armor piercing power a little bit by taking these traits. And then proxy as well, just for sharing stuff. And on my trinket, a little bit of crit chance, a little bit of movement speed, and shrapnel, which is good because of all the grenades we can throw. We can add some extra damage on with that. So that's what I'm running with. I'm the kind of player that prioritizes defense and not taking damage in Vermintide, so a few things there to help me out with it. The extra stamina, the block cost reduction. That's how I like to run it. Now, onto the talents. Level 5, I've got Engineer's Resolve. This gives me temporary health when I stagger stuff, and as we're using dual hammers, we can knock over a lot of the lighter stuff quite easily, so that's useful. As we don't have big swings on our dual hammers, we don't really need the enthusiasm or the other trait, so Resolve is the best one, I think, for how I'm trying to rock this. I also have leading shots. Every 4 ranged attack is a guaranteed critical hit. So simple enough, you get the idea. Armor piercing slugs, this one can also be useful, I think. You could take either of these two. I go with leading shots just for that extra critical hit, but this could be useful as well when gunning down mobs, so that's a potential useful one. Scavenge shot, this is not really much use to us. Melee power increase, because we're not doing that much melee, we're focusing on range, so one of these two is really going to be the best choice, I think, for the level 10. For level 15, Mainstay is my perk of choice. All the staggery goodness. You could go for Bulwark as well. I don't think Enhanced Power is of great use. I think we'll get much more damage out of the staggering. And on to the level 20 with Superior Gaskets, which for me is a must take. This is the only talent for me in this level, because pressure is not lost over time. Increase of attack speed as well, but the max stack is reduced by 1, so we can only max 4 stacks rather than 5, which just means we reload a little bit slower. But the reason why I find that the superior talent in this class is because if you choose anything else like experimental steam capacitors, which is also pretty good, it doesn't really fit for the way I want to play this class. And full head of steam is nice, but not really much use for what I'm going to be doing. Perhaps more useful if you want to gun down elites and specials and heavies a bit more. But for me, superior gaskets is far superior, and here's why. When you use your crank gun, you will obviously remove some of your special bar and have to reload. Now you see in the corner that this perk is slowly going down. The build pressure perk only lasts for 12 seconds. So if I crank the gun to reload it and then go off and do some melee fighting, there's a good chance the perk will run out and I won't be reloading anymore, and I'll have to whip the gun out and do it again to get that perk going again. So that's what happens if you use any perk except Superior Gaskets. When you use Superior Gaskets, that perk for reloading and building that pressure back up no longer goes down. As it says, pressure is no longer lost over time. The perk stays there permanently until you fire again, which means we're always building pressure. So even if we go into melee and we're fighting, we'll still be building the pressure. Now for level 25, Ablative Armor is my talent of choice for 2 reasons. As I say, damage avoidance is up there as my highest priority, so this helps with that. And also, it's useful 100% of the time. It stacks a damage reduction buff, whereas Bombardier, which gives you both bomb effects in one go, and Piston Power are both only useful when you actually use those 2 things, charged attacks or grenades, whereas Ablative Armor is always in use all of the time, so you just get a bit more out of it. And with playing defensive for me, if I get hit and I use that Ablative Armor trait up, I'll then kind of play it safe for the next 30 seconds to build it back up and to help keep my damage received down to a minimum. And for the final talent, I go for Innovative Ammo Hoppers. This gives an extra 50% ammo essentially to the crank gun, which is very important for this playstyle as we're going to be using the gun so much. You also don't consume any ammo if you kill a special for 4 seconds, so you can go a bit nutso after killing a special with it. Linked compression chamber I think is a bit useless because there isn't really a situation where you should need your gun to be at full speed instantly, only if something's really close to you, but if something's really close to you, you should probably have your melee weapon out anyway. And for plated shot, this can definitely be useful if you want to be more of an elite special killer with the crank gun instead, because it'll mow down chaos warriors if you want it to, but we're going to be using the crank gun for more crowd control and general use than any kind of special killing. And of course, part of being an engineer is blowing stuff up. So we can use our bombs as well. You'll use these in the normal means that you would do. You can just carry a few more of them, which is useful. One other item that can be of great use to us is the concentration potion. Because it refills our ability bar, it basically gives us infinite ammo for a little bit. For me, I like to empty the ammo bar fully so that I've got nothing left, and then instead of having to crank it, I can just drink the potion, and then I'll switch to kind of a burst shot, so it allows the potion to still refill my bar a bit, but also allows me to continue firing somewhat. So that's one option. You could drink the potion while your bar is full and it'll keep it full pretty much. Can be very useful for bosses anyway, so you can save those potions for those times where you really need the extra firepower. So there you go. That's enough examples. Let's get into some action, goddammit. So I'm generally carrying around the crank gun most of the time. If they're small groups, I'll gun them down. If it's just 1 or 2 enemies, then I probably won't. It might be a little bit of a waste. But of course, the key thing is to remember to reload after every shot. If you've played a lot of FPS games, you're probably in the habit of doing this already. And we want to get full crank, so we need 4 stacks of the cranking power to get the most out of it, so it recharges the fastest. Or it's 5 charges if you're not using superior gaskets, but if you set it up like me, then you'll have the 4 charges. And I did test out timing how long it would take to refill a completely empty ability bar with only 1 crank of pressure. It took around just under 4 minutes. Remembering of course that we have the talent that makes our ability bar 50% bigger. With the full 4 cranks of pressure though, it took only 1 minute. So roughly we can assume that with every crank of pressure, you'll take a minute off the recharge time. Roughly. But ultimately, you'll want to recharge to full 4 cranks whenever possible. So keep an eye on that icon in the bottom left corner to make sure there's a 4 on it. Now, I can't stress enough how wonderful the crank gun is for taking out large crowds very, very quickly. This is why we want to try and keep our charges up as much as possible, because when you hear that horde coming, you better get ready because you can wipe them out in seconds. It does help if you have teammates who, instead of trying to get the kills themselves, will actually just protect you so you can take out the horde, and then you can be much more effective. Keep an eye out for choke points as well, and wait for the enemies to run into them rather than randomly spraying on them in the open, because it can be a lot easier to funnel and a lot more efficient and not so much of a waste of ammo. Naturally, this isn't always possible, but if you should spot a choke point, try to take advantage of it, because goddamn, it renders hordes absolutely useless against your hail of crank gun doom. The crank gun crowd clearing power can also be a real lifesaver in bad situations, like when there's a boss and then a horde comes along. Well, you can quickly delete the horde with little to no effort. And of course, the crank gun can be great for gunning down bosses as well, but sometimes you just got to take the reload. Just make sure you get your cranks in before you change to a different weapon. You really got to try and figure out the right times to be firing the crank gun, reloading the crank gun, using your melee weapon. But you'll want to be taking the back line most of the time, protecting your allies, trying not to shoot them too much. They don't always make it easy diving in front of you all the time, but you just got to find those nice little spots where you can chill out the way and just blast away with the crank gun. And then when it's time to reload, well, it's hammer time. And this, remember, is where superior gaskets comes into play. All the time I'm mashing these Skaven slaves to bits, I'm reloading the crank gun, not having to worry about the pressure buff disappearing. So you can play it cool with your crank gun most of the time, but when the hordes start coming, that's where you need to start working to protect your allies, taking that back line, but of course staying aware yourself, keeping an eye out for enemies flanking you, because of course there's always something behind you, so you got to check your corners every now and again. But for the most part, we're trying to run around as a walking turret, basically. That's really the aim of the game when we're playing engineer this way. And as for the handgun, that's for when those specials or elites come chasing after you. You can take them down quickly, and because we're using another ranged weapon, we really don't run out of ammo very often, because the handgun is only used for taking out specials and sometimes elites. Do remember to try and reload it before you put it away though, otherwise the next time you go to pull it out and use it in a hurry, you'll have to reload first, which will be a bit annoying. So got to remember to reload before you put that handgun away, otherwise you switch back to the hammers and just start smashing the crap out of everything in sight. But only until the crank gun is reloaded. And I think that is about the gist of it. It's just really about looking to find the right spots to sit, to unload your precious crank gun all over the enemy faces, while hopefully your allies get stuck into them, making your job a lot easier. As we have the ablative armor on a little bit as well, if something should sneak up behind you and bonk you on the back of the head, you'll get a damage reduction on it, so we can turn around and deal with it, and then try to stay safe for the next 30 seconds or so that ablative armor builds back up, and we can keep our damage to a minimum. So keep the crank gun out for the most part, make sure you remember to reload it, and when you are reloading, the only reason that the melee weapons are really going to be out is because you're reloading the crank gun. When the crank gun's ready again, full up, unload it into your foe's souls. And the handgun is the emergency weapon for dealing with elites and specials. So there you go, how to run Outcast Engineer as a pro crowd controller with a little fancy for taking out specials. If you are going to run this build, you'll probably want to make sure that somebody else or two in your party has some good armor piercing to deal with chaos warriors and the like, because heavy armor can be a little bit of a problem for our little dual hammers. So you can be a pretty good all-rounder, can be a little bit of a boss killer as well if you couple things up with potions, with the concentration potion or the strength potion. Combine that with a full stack of your crank gun and you can absolutely unload into the enemy rat ogre, chaos spawn, whatever, and you'll do a good bit of damage. Not quite a boss killer, but you can definitely put the hurt on them. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Do let me know how you like this video, as it is the first of its kind. If people like it, I'll do more. Do let me know if there's anything you did like, you didn't like, or anything that you felt was missing, because I do like to try and improve my work. And as I'm hoping to make Vermintide a little bit of a bigger part of this channel, as well as Darktide, hopefully next year, you'll probably be seeing more of it. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the future.